Greetings and welcome to Liminal Light, a show that explores the languages of myth and star, earth, sky, tongue, and spirit through weekly astrological forecasts. I'm your host, Chris. Enjoy. As Venus squared Uranus yesterday, the Sun squares him today. The effect as well as the influence of Uranus is completely unpredictable. Your house could blow up, or you could suddenly have a good idea. That old-fashioned cartoon light bulb hovering above your skull could be a heavily armored drone or a hand from heaven offering amphetamines of realization. Venus felt the ontological strings attached to her raw material suddenly go live, tugging and creating great tension in the quaking wood grains and swirled signatures on steel, the enduring aesthetic of those items, their ongoing usefulness and long history in the hands of hunters, warriors, and workmen, as well as the brass-topped canes of fat cat corporate upper crust that manage the ebb and flow of so many exotic woods or precious gems with the wink of an eye that signals a click of a mouse, that signals a cascade of earthly substance, and the practical concerns of wallet watchers worldwide. Within all this, Venus strained against the leather interior of her luxury vehicle with priceless gin on her breath and designer perfume wafting from the body tucked away beneath linens, wools, and silks. She nearly kicked through the moonroof and emerged into the fiery and wrathful aspect. In a moment, an epiphany occurred, but one experienced in the senses. Many of these materials were not hers, not truly herself or significations, but a superimposition of an exterior structure. She was a burning rose and a fountain of blood that ran as sap in the tendrils of belladonna, and not expensive suits and status symbols. For many of you, this may not have been so overt, but the desire, for example, to be independent from your employer and express your artistic visions as a career may have occurred to you as Venus squared Uranus, and now that the Sun follows suit, your intention and vision follows. You begin to identify with this independence, but it causes tensions in your life as you may not be yet free from the system that has its clutches on you. And to wriggle out, you must play a long game, one Saturn signs off on, saying that you may be released from the conglomerate's management if you complete X amount of tasks and pass through Y amount of obstacles and detail the experiences of Z ordeals. This sounds reasonable enough, but is not any relief to the immortal itching and burning you feel in your being and in those things you hold in your hand, the beauty of a carnelian or the sight of a hawk on high, gliding overhead and turning to fall upon its prey. This tension is disruptive to the plan all along, but can be put into good use. Friction causes motion, and it is in the crucible that we are born. To borrow logic from the machine age, there is energy in the heat that the rubbing and showing of sparks. With the Sun square Uranus, it is the vision itself that shakes. The ring of management, everything you have created up to now, and the upkeep it requires, leap and rumbles on the table before you. And the leveling and toppling that occurs changes the game. You are no longer playing Monopoly, but a contact sport. Your muscles engage as you throw yourself into the game, put your heart in it. Holdings are being lost and pieces are falling off the board. Some of them were chips with your kitty, while others were gates that barred your path. Take the opportunity to make a break, of course, but remember, regular rules may again apply after the rumbling subsides. An experimental approach is best, especially as Aquarius season is soon to dawn. As Capricorn's third decan is about managing empires and wielding the power we've consolidated, Venus can become very attached to not only dominance and authority, but also the material objects attached to them, as this tends to be a preferred aesthetic in Capricorn periods, even if in this age these are spendy clothing brands that tout their low environmental impact or head count of the trendiest breeds of organic sheep, as much as the old guard of Armani and All Access passes. With her sextile to Chiron, there comes an opportunity to let this all go, To whatever degree you love power, control, or conventional materialism, you may be able to take a deep breath on the 14th and remember that all things become one in the process of universal destruction and inevitable entropy. Attachment to power and even power objects, materialistic bonds to real materials or materials of strategic significance, such as status symbols, become willing in some way to work with the painful process of letting go and giving up, letting all become one in a healing process. For some, the emphasis will be on the healing, and others, the emphasis will be on the pain. This is an optional or volitional aspect. There could be an opportunity to engage with this, but for many, it'll only be a flickering that quickly fades. On January 15th, as the sun is next up to sextile Chiron, management of the empire which you have built is able to consider healing ongoing wounds by letting things go and releasing control. This may be wounds of the identity related to material holds, such as allowing someone else to take care of a certain aspect of a business or a project. For example, letting your partner worry about the bookkeeping so you can concentrate on the construction. This is as volitional and optional as the previous Venus-Chiron aspect, although the sun being a particularly volitional planet, especially in Capricorn, this might be more likely to engage activity. The combination of attraction and identification to Chiron, collaboration, might have consolidating personal or imperial power, depending on how profile your life is, in liquidating certain assets, or simply loosening your grip on what you own and what you control, may free up some space to heal some old wounds. Jupiter finally completes this sextile with Pluto, an aspect that has been applying for a week already with some drama. The coherence of intimate conflicts and relationships of intense and even mystical congress or exchanges of locked embattlement, mutual frictions submerged in alchemical salt baths, where the particles that shear off either party dissolve as one into one solution, which circulates into the brain center and lubricates new thinking and perspectives. The two great beasts that either copulate or combat, or both, accumulate greater understanding by doing so, and grow more nuanced, increase their skills on carnal levels, become more instinctually aware of opportunities, discard motives that no longer serve for pain or pleasure, and stumble upon styles they glean from each other. Aware of the gaping hole in the architecture of strategy, the lack of stability in the foundations of society, the unknown future, non-applicable to previous precedents, the alien influences that secretly manipulate the hierarchy and control over the power. Those engaged in this grapple of desire, of seduction and severance, of cyclical offense and defense, whether with a partner or with themselves or with the world as their opponent or the laws of nature, in a world lacking of role models or viable handholds and littered with slippery slopes, most intentionally placed, we rely on our internal and intimate conflicts to temper and teach us. As there is currently no future before us except a seemingly looming apocalypse that is promoted by the monolithic system of society, it is our own personal battles that refine our focus. After opportunities, provide pleasure, drive desire, and lead us to growth and expansion. The world is dead, but we are not. We are alive in the zombified corpse, mostly a mechanical horror that lurches with rancid meat around threateningly. We dodge their death and embrace our own, one that dies with honor and leads to unfurling of flags long sullied or suppressed. And in this rebirth we seek mutually, we find our wings, cramped and atrophied but beginning to work once more, whether they be feathered or scaled. And it requires that we train each other through ongoing intensity of challenge, as well as sensual engagement. There is a hole in the structure, so we must fill it with our nightmares. For now, at least they are our own and not the grist of the mill. January 16th, our luminaries come together once more, darkening the night sky and allowing the stars to chatter and communicate freely with those who walk the earth. A new moon at 26 degrees, 54 minutes Capricorn at 9:30 p.m. EST. By Decon, we find the inception of a lunation cycle in the soil of emotional burdens of responsibility. strategical, practical, managerial needs prioritized over personal ones. Our emotions transferred to power, stability concerns. Think of Daniel Day and There Will Be Blood, or Pacino in The Godfather. Their emotions are fully applied to their empires and barely exist for food, family, and fun. Such things only trigger annoyance or regret or sheer indifference, whereas development snares and interior politics could incept pounding hearts, gloating glee, or raging wrath. This is a rough decon for the moon, as is all Capricorn, which puts our celestial nurturer on rations, not for health's sake, but for structural stratagem, and hands the Queen of Comfort marching orders. Although when we delineate by the lunar mansion, the 24th, we receive a different picture. Since this is so late in Capricorn, it reflects the sign ruler Saturn's confirmation for hard work done, and here we see finally getting fed, being paid after it has been earned, received at last what one needs, being finally nurtured, the increase of income, the funds to begin new construction, and being stable enough to found marriages and familial relationships. This is a time those holding power positions become more vulnerable to attacks and sorceries. So fitting both descriptions, solar decon and lunar mansion, this is a time empires may be toppled, and the resources that shake out are distributed to those further down in the structure. The fact that Saturn is in rulership might skew this effect to the more conservative degree and be a mix of the two. You might be able to receive what you are owed, but have to pay out and level your own debts. Those in high towers may have firmer fortresses than usual, but the rattling at the cage bottoms might still cause a few coins to be tossed out. Likely this is only going to work through sanctioned and official channels. Saturn might open his purse at the end of a court battle, but not necessarily in response to a street rally. Not to say you should sue your boss, but think along established order and pick up payments where you've already earned them. Of course, I mean this both literally and metaphorically, as this is somehow the way astrology works. You get the allegory as much as the reality. So in all that you need and require in the tail end of Capricorn and much of Saturn's 3-year tenure in his earthen domicile, expect nourishment to come from your acknowledged efforts. Following traditional steps may bring in rewards. On January 17th, Venus, slowly separating from conjunction with the Sun, struggling to advance out from under his beams and shine as an expression in her own right, proceeds before him into Aquarius, where she is the ruler of the first decan by Chaldean order. Here she highlights the very odd and cerebral artistic qualities of the sign ruled by Saturn. Again, Saturn is in rulership, so the freedom-loving influence of Venus in Aquarius will be in respect to certain hard boundaries, sharply defining what is inside and what is outside the norm, like a late 90s record store sectionalization. A is conventional, while B is experimental. Think of free jazz milieu, where if someone plays a steady beat in any way whatsoever, they play with rigid restrictions. Especially as Venus is still combust, this is likely to be a more psychological and introverted influence, quietly guiding our likes and dislikes, the temperature of our tastes. All outsider, experimental, strange, fringe, new, innovative, and unorthodox ideas will light up with artistic potential, drive people out on limbs of exploration as they become attracted to such notions, creating interestingly cultural, social dynamism. Aquarius is abstract and intellectual, and Venus here delights in daring new thoughts, and beauty that has been ignored or misunderstood, and brilliance yet recognized. This is both Art Brut and the University Press essay on the subject. It is art and highbrow thought about art, and the turning one's back on intellectualism as an intellectual reaction, to decide intellectually that you will return to instincts and only paint with your feet, or that you will paint and show it to no one whatsoever, and that is your act of art, which others critique and pick apart while you combat the press and lampoon it in underground chapbooks distributed at secret, subversive gallery spaces. This is idea art, renegade art, with or without the intention. And without the social grace and charm of Libra, Cultural phenomenon tends to stick to it, even if it is the circulatory systems that feed only the subcultures. An interesting turn for Venus, recently purified and realigned to intention and spiritual purpose. She straightaway assesses the material plan and then gets experimental and looks for inspiration in the margins. Of course, Venus is more than art, so keep your senses set to look toward love and pleasure in the same venue. Maybe date night reservations read more romance made in the restaurant that serves rare, raw insects and fungal cordials distilled in autonomous laboratory settings, rather than your favorite pub. January 18th, while Venus has begun exploring Saturn's airy domicile, Mercury drills deeper into earthy Capricorn, reaching its second decan. Here is inherent resourcefulness and understanding of terrain and materials' natural value, whether strategic or market worth, turns more towards plotting, planning, and organization on large scales along extended agenda lines. For those assembling something big, it's likely to be an invaluable resource for this week. Here our scheming minds may become focused enough to pull together monumental works, creating those things that last and endure and stand up to tests of time. This is not the moment for temporary fixes, so be prepared to either schedule long days, extended trajectories, or recruitment of labor. Mercury could have you on the horn, calling it all together, or in your studio for endless hours, assembling the finishing touches from tall ladders. These might be practical works in epic proportions, like having a 30-foot deep pond dug in your backyard, or creating a state park-worthy trail system on your 5 acres. Keep in mind this is Mercury here, playing with co-present Saturn and the Sun. Meticulous and strategical construction, escalating premeditated strategy, the communication and detailed logic that sets up hierarchies and then scales them. But being Mercury and loving both many, other, and opposite, you must be careful not to begin plotting too many plans at once, even if they seem at the time all interrelated. The time then comes for Mars to aspect Chiron, this time by trine. Desire urges at levels capable of deleterious transgression are in harmony with the process of letting go of everything and experiencing letting go of life wounds. This may not be a positive harmony. There may be a definite transgression recipe here. For some, it is a classic binge and purge to get something seedy, sinister, and salacious out of their system, like a licentious affair. But for others, this could be letting go of all inhibitions and partaking in acts they sorely regret afterwards, or even have destructive and perhaps legal repercussions. As this is a trine, it is a harmonization that exists, but often requires further tension to activate. Yet this can simply be volitional intention. With Mars as the planet that screams go and charge, an effect is more likely than another body in its place. It would be good to guard against such regretful behavior if your Mars is oversensitive, but for most of us there exists some upcoming circuitry for some good old-fashioned debauch as balm to heal all. On January 19th, at last a heavy Capricorn season comes to a close as the Sun enters Aquarius. The Sun is in detriment in Aquarius, so little solar quality of authenticity, honor, vitality, performance, and virtue show through from personal perspectives. Instead, it is seen how central society, the culture of the masses, or status quo in general, are utterly absent of these qualities. Incapable of them, it must be subverted to reach truth, which are sought elsewhere. Really anywhere adverse to the center, or out of the perimeter or another. This is the identification with the outside, the frontiers of everything, where lost virtue and semblance of authenticity is sought in the beyond the norms, or the already explored. The center-loving Sun who loves to express warmly to be itself, or at least the characterization that best represents it, cannot express well or hardly at all here, and is forced to express intellectual otherness instead, and go searching empty places in underdeveloped landscapes. This becomes then a time where our spirits embark on solitary thinking, or at least brainstorming in small enclaves and annexes, We identify with alternative and experiments and are willing to innovate with our identities, even if an outcome is not clearly set. With Saturn in rulership in Capricorn and Aquarius being a Saturn-ruled sign, this might be more conservative than usual, as the corporate meetings where the CEO encourages everyone to think outside the box and look for innovations everywhere. He doesn't mean for employees to begin making their own hours or start taking psychedelics. The parameters will be defined even though experimentation becomes necessary to stimulate a climb up out of a plateau. If the latter rungs have ended, then a flying machine must be invented. We must begin to find ways in which we can do what we do not yet have the ability to. This isn't achieved always by looking at what we have already done. But with Aquarius season oncoming and Saturn in Capricorn, it will probably be a blend of looking back and looking everywhere else. Well, welcome back, my co-host, the wonderful Bonnie.
Hello. Today we have Ryan Riehle as our guest.
Yeah, exciting.
He just knocked over a teapot and it's running down the driveway in sunny California.
A full teapot,
A full teapot.
And I got a full cup.
But you got a full cup.
Yeah. What kind of tea?
Oh, yeah.
But I got a full cup. Yeah, I'm watching it. It's good, yeah.
What kind of tea do you have there?
Yeah, I'm here again. Thank you, guys. Oh, yeah, Pu'er.
Pu'er, yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, what have you been, you've been surfing a
Yeah.
lot since last time we talked to you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely been in the water quite a bit recently. It's been pretty nice. Yeah, down in Bodega Bay yesterday, watching the birds.
Yeah, that's where they film the birds.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all still there. And yeah, the bay actually, I think it's a San Andreas fault line, so it dropped within the last 100 years. It wasn't a bay, but it is now. It used to be a pasture.
Oh, weird, crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it'd be cool if they had filmed it before it dropped, you know, so they could do a remake, like as water, you know.
I know, right? Yeah, well, it's
a little bit more of a dramatic change than
movie.
like gentrification or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, looking.
Yeah, what are you guys doing?
We're looking ahead at the week to come and thinking about what kind of stones you might be wanting to suggest for us, but I guess we can take it one step at a time.
One day at a time.
One day at a time, as we usually tend to do.
Yeah, it looks like you got a day spread, day by day.
Yeah.
Day by day.
Yeah, we're going to take it day by day. That's our strategy. And that's a pretty good strategy in general for Capricorn time, very sequential, but also, you know, you want to look ahead for the whole year or maybe for multiple years. Play the long game, you know, but that still involves what you do every day, breaking it down into smaller and smaller pieces. But first, we begin on the 14th with Uranus squaring the Sun. And, you know, that's still going to be kind of squaring Venus. And even though Venus is separating, that kind of was yesterday's vibe, but it's still enough to be hitting both things at once and being not really working as a unit, but kind of displacing that effect over the two. So you're going to get like Uranus's like, and this is the end of this period. Like in May, Uranus switches into Taurus, and then kind of goes back into Aries, but then dips back into Taurus for good for 7 years. But this is kind of the tail end of Uranus for the past 7 years, being all about individual creativity and individual drive and that indivisible like expression of self, that pure fire, squaring the sun and Venus, who are thinking along managerial lines and strategy and managing everything that they're holding and everything they've created. So it's an interesting combo because it seems like one of the things that Uranus has really been doing as an effect over the years, getting people thinking about being independent, especially like you see a lot of like self-employment, people trying to be like, okay, I just want to figure out how to do my thing for myself and just be able to support myself and revolutionize their independence. So having the sun and Venus thinking about like managing everything they've built and it being causing a tension between that independence is interesting. Like maybe your management of your personal empire is not adding up to freeing you.
Absolutely. It can be more of a burden.
Yeah, I feel like.
Yeah, and that, you can't always strategize yourself out of it. It looks to me almost like there's one thing is telling you to just kind of like take a leap of faith maybe, or just like, and another thing is like, no, if we just stay on top of it, we can manage ourselves into our new form.
I like the way that you're talking about these moves that you've been making towards self-employment, where you likened it to a boxing match, just having to like take on each opponent as it comes, in order to get that belt, that self-employment,
that self-employment
like,
belt,
self-employment belt, like actually successful.
Yeah, like you take a step back, you do some work for someone, then you get in there and you jab just for the money, and then you like kind of change, you switch feet, and then you kind of work for yourself until your opponent is KO'd, I guess, until you're out of the ring a champion,
Well, yeah, it takes a lot of endurance, and you got to put up with a lot of different changes and frustrations. I feel like when I thought about this topic, I was thinking about orgone energy and clear quartz, and orgone would be, or not even orgone specifically, but rutilated quartz, like a clear quartz that has a metal inside of it.
Oh, interesting. For like a clear channel?
Yeah, like rutilated quartz for strength, really.
Okay.
And that's where I was also thinking of garnet, like a red garnet, sort of strength and protection. But and in the people will make orgone with like a spiral of copper and some other stones, dipped in a resin. But the rutilated quartz actually just exists in nature with like a titanium or gold strand inside of it. And I think something about that like catalyst between quartz and metal, and thinking about this like intense sort of energy machine, and sort of how you have to be like channeling some power from within.
Yeah, that makes sense. This Venus in Capricorn is very much about stones and materials. Like I keep saying to Bonnie, like, the difference between, because Venus looks at value, but in a different way than Mercury looks at value. Like Mercury might say, this is how much something is worth. This is how much money you'll get for this. Like, this is what it's going for. But Venus looks at it and it's like, oh, this is valuable. This is like, I value this because it's beautiful. So
I can see beauty in everything.
Yeah, I'm attracted to this, A lot of people might be attracted to this, And so it's but she really can see what stuff's made of and see the division of the animal, vegetable, and mineral kingdom and beyond, what's like further nuanced. So yeah, that's really interesting, like metal and mineral,
Yeah, when you look at a piece of rutilated quartz, you can see the metal set inside of the quartz, and it's almost like framed inside of there.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that before. And then, so the next thing we're going to start getting over later that day, we'll have Venus sextile Chiron, and then on the 15th, we'll have Sun sextile Chiron. But then later in the week, we even have Mars trine Chiron. So we get this like theme coming back through first in like what you're attracted to and aesthetics and love and pleasure, and immediately after in your identity and what you're trying to do and what your spirit is striving to do. And then later in the week on the 18th, we get like a harmonization with like our actions and our those like kind of primal desires, the aggressive kind of like libidinous like drives, with Chiron, who's trying to kind of can either be a wound or like a pain, a pain point in your life or in your psyche, or a kind of process of healing. It's like a spectrum in that, and I mentioned that some people are going to feel it more as pain, some people is going to feel it more as healing, but you don't always get a big effect, especially when it's sextiles or trines, but that there's 3 of them over the course of the week. It'll be thematic, that you're like trying to kind of be like, I'm trying to get over this thing. And you often don't like say those things to people. Like when people are like, hey, how you doing? You're like, oh, I'm trying to really get over my jealousy issues. What have
you been up to?
Yeah. But it seems like it's a lot to do with like letting go of control, like in a healthy way, being like, okay, I don't need to control all the things I normally am trying to control, and I don't need to be attracted.
And I'm actually not even
things.
good at trying to control all that.
Yeah, it might be about like displacing that to people who are better and can help you out, or it might just be like not really caring about it anymore.
Right. Prioritizing.
Yeah, prioritizing what your workload is. And
you're definitely spending energy on trying. You're putting energy into something that isn't getting you anywhere. So.
Yeah, and you have a finite amount of energy. So, yeah, strategy is a big, important topic in Capricorn time. And then we get this new moon in late Capricorn on the 16th, and that's like the inception of a moon cycle in a focus on our responsibilities in the emotional sense. And that's why I mentioned in the forecast, Daniel Day-Lewis and There Will Be Blood, or Al Pacino and The Godfather, especially the sequels where he's not just becoming the Godfather, he's like a psycho. Yeah. That their emotions are caught up in their empires. They're not as much personal emotions. So that might be how this period begins to feel, especially before all the Aquarius stuff starts to happen. So what do you think, Ryan? Any stone suggestions for letting go of control and keeping emotions under control when we start to feel emotional about our empires?
Yeah, I mean, there were a number of things that came up while thinking of this, and it's funny. One of the first things was like protection. Like, oh, I gotta keep it safe, But that, I think, is sort of a general theme of the time that I've been thinking about, which would include things like black onyx and jet and tourmaline, black tourmaline. But in specific reference to this, I think I've been thinking about theta brainwaves and things like amethyst, actually, which are really good for letting go and sort of going into that state of consciousness where you're letting go of things and you're letting them flow, and trying to think about how you can actually be distracted by taking yourself into a more blissful state. And it's that purple ray, I think, but thinking of it as an extension from like the root of something like a garnet that I mentioned earlier, that would be red. But how with amethyst we're getting out into this direction of like letting go of sort of circular thinking.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Did you say jet as well? Like it was like onyx, jet, and black tourmaline?
Yeah, and that sort of came up just as an idea of like protection and sort of feeling secure enough that it's almost like a fidelity to yourself, and onyx in particular works a lot with fidelity, but sort of as an anchor in order to feel safe to let go.
Aren't they also protection stones? Often like black stones are protection stones for miners.
Yeah, definitely. And that's I guess where it would be coming from, would be feeling safe. Sort of times where you don't really feel safe that much, it's nice to have something that'll remind you that, oh, okay, I'm about as safe as I can be, you know. Anything could happen at any time, but yeah, those stones are really good for knowing that you have some sort of force field up, and so they can allow your consciousness to take those steps.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I was thinking about when you were talking about it, and I know I've read before that they're related to miners, you know, because they're in the dark, they're in the depths, and then this whole period of Venus looking at materials and looking what's beyond the crust of the earth into like greater materials, and that's where she finds stones and metals and metallurgy and things like that. But that, you know, there are certain spirits that are related to black stones who are related with wealth and acquiring wealth and how value operates in general, because precious things are taken out of the darkness. And yeah, there's this whole interplay between like protection, the darkness, what is hidden, and what's valued, and Venus and Venus, like materialism. And yeah, it's almost like Venus's dark side, but being able to play that dark side in a positive way, you know?
Yeah, and it can be an intense situation, especially with working with obsidian, where it can be sharp, you know. And I've kind of thought about things like this, how having several black stones around, or sort of this idea of like a black tourmaline and jet and an onyx kind of all together working together, sort of this idea that like it's it can be an intense thing with some of these topics, and that you kind of have you know, the way that things work together is a good part of the consciousness.
It makes sense for Saturn being in rulership. It's like a very Saturn heavy time that we just start gravitating towards black stones, not even necessarily to invoke Saturn, but just naturally, you know. It's like, okay, well, let's play in the key of Saturn, right, you know, and see like what kind of protection we can get from his realm and what kind of advancement we can make. Because I mean, a lot of the strategies within, you know, the next 3 years or the next 6 years with Saturn in rulership are just going to be sticking with like Saturnine strategies, you know, and petitioning him to like kind of go easy on you.
Yeah. I mean, there's something I read about black onyx recently, because I've been drawn to it again, and how it was used in so much jewelry, but it's often actually just any sort of black agate or black stone, and if it's not that dark, it's dyed, and a lot of it is dyed, even the stuff that's in a lot of jewelry, but how it's sort of like something you could almost just pick up
right,
on a walk, you know. It's out there everywhere, really. Yeah,
because I have a bunch of green onyx that's dyed, but they often call Indian onyx, you know, that it's white and then they dye it green. So probably a lot of that they dye black as well.
Yeah, dye it black. Get some RIT dye.
Yeah. So
throw it on the stove.
Right. So what about can you go back into what you said about amethyst, and then maybe we'll move on into the Aquarius stuff that's about to come in?
Yeah, well, it was sort of that idea of these characters that you were just talking about, and the cyclical sort of pattern that happens where your mind can run in this loop of like not wanting to relinquish control, and it's almost like an addict, you know. And amethyst works well with addiction, but it also works well with like release and death and transition and the dream world. And thinking about how the purple ray, sort of this high vibrational stone like amethyst, can actually be a reminder to just really let go, and can lead into some sort of state of tranquility when dealing with hard things.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, definitely the letting go part of it. It's a good combo too, like the black and then the light purple.
Absolutely.
With like hints of red garnet.
Mm-hmm.
Ultraviolet.
Yeah, the ultraviolet that's sort of like stored or reflected almost secretly or invisibly in the black.
Remember how it's
it's interesting actually thinking about that, like a black light.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, totally. Wait, but what about it being the color of the year?
It's the Pantone color of the year.
Oh right, yeah.
Ultraviolet.
Ultraviolet, yeah. And that's going to be the next millennial color too.
Oh, it's probably done by now, right?
Yeah.
They move so fast.
They already figured that one out. They're zipping all around.
Get your sunscreen on.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Get your sunscreen on and then go in the black light. That's like maybe our astrological advice to survive
Cover
the week.
yourself in zinc oxide.
Yeah. Yeah, we should start getting more.
Bentonite clay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what about Venus moving to Aquarius and the Sun moving into Aquarius and starting to get into this outsider vibe and like looking into the perimeters of things?
Yeah, and is that, which date is that in reference to again?
That's Venus enters Aquarius on the 17th and then the Sun enters on the 19th. So it's like the second half of the week after the new moon. And there was something about like plans and concentration, and I keep thinking of the purple stones with this again, but it was something like fluorite, and thinking about balance, and it's this purple color that's in lepidolite, and I'm holding right now a piece of fluorite that is from a hot spring that's a purple color that's made from the lithium that occurs in the water, and it's like a lithium balancing color. But people in the past actually would use purple fluorite as these talismans and reminders to sort of stay on track with a plan or an idea that you've set into motion, to follow it through. And I guess the idea is sort of like dedicating yourself to a plan or an idea to follow through, and using that as your ground and your balance. Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. I mean, there's going to be a lot of magic going on like that for the next 3 years with Saturn and Capricorn. That's almost similar to like self-cursing, where you self-binding, where you almost like put a curse on yourself to follow through with your plan, so you have the discipline to do it, and you
just chain yourself to your desk. Yeah,
it's essentially like chaining yourself to your desk magically. But that if you kind of break from your plan and you start taking too many days off from like these goals you set out to accomplish within the next 3 years, you'll crazy things will happen to you, and they'll scare you back into like putting your nose back to the grindstone.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa, I better get back to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, that's definitely.
Well, I mean, that completely relates to Mercury in the second decan of Capricorn.
Yeah,
where you have to be careful not to have too many plans at once. And so with that advice that you just gave us, Ryan, it's perfect. I was thinking list, but I way prefer having physical object to remind me and to keep me on track.
Yeah, the purple fluorite. I've carried that one with me for months sometimes, just sort of as a reminder to follow through on something that you're trying to get done. I mean, that one will get you in the tank and drive you across the country, you know.
Nice.
Quite
purple fluorite.
Quite literally. Yeah. If you're literally like thinking about driving a military vehicle across the country,
Think about
take Ryan's advice. This is like, he's not making this up.
Fluorite.
Yeah, the purple fluorite. And again, it's like that amethyst.
It jogs you out of like circular thinking.
Yeah, but it keeps you on track.
Yeah,
and sort of. I guess
perfect.
that's the idea.
Yeah, that's perfect for that. What Bonnie's saying is Mercury in the second decan of Capricorn is really good at constructing monumental plans and calling it all together. But since Mercury likes to go different directions at the same time,
He's sort of a trickster.
Yeah, and is also a trickster. It could decide that all these different plans you have are interrelated. You know, that you're like, well, I have to do this. Like, it's okay if I do this and that at the same time, because they relate. You know, like it's okay if I like try to like build an airplane from scratch and go to France, because that's like.
Because how else would I get to France but by an airplane?
Yeah, it's really. Yeah.
I know.
Anyway, yeah. So those are perfect. Yeah, I'm curious, like, about the Aquarius stuff coming up, and the outsider kind of fringe experimental, intellectual, abstract, conceptual kind of period that follows. It's a really strange transition. And the moon, you know, we're gonna have a new moon in late Capricorn, and then it immediately goes into Aquarius, you know. So it's gonna be a pretty big shift from all this like stratagem thinking and like groundwork and trying to like advance yourself. Like it's very much the kind of thinking that's like, okay, let's get our retirement plan in order, and then, you know, and then in like 2 or 3 weeks later, you're starting to like think really abstractly and have all these kind of like really experimental ideas.
Yeah, I was when I was reading this, from what you'd written about it, I was thinking about this sort of outside anchor, where, and I'll think about this with stones, where something like, in this case, like a blue stone, say something that's gonna channel your voice and maybe health and creativity, but how that's sort of this outside anchor that like kind of would go along with everything the whole time. And in particular, in this situation, I was thinking of blue apatite. And I think the name itself already refers to like a hunger, you know?
Yeah,
like you're feeding a hunger.
Yeah, because it really is. I mean, the reason to look outside is because you don't have the thing that's going to do it on the inside. You look at your tools and you're like, well, what we need to do, we don't have that tool. That doesn't exist in here. So you're like, and we don't even know if it exists. It's something you're like, is there, you know, when you're like, is there something that can just drill a hole through this, but from the other side, and you can set the angle, and you're like, I don't know. I don't even know if that exists. So you have to start looking for it. And then you might find out that it doesn't. So some people, you know, who are mechanically inclined might be like, well, I'm gonna rig one up, you know, and then lead to a patent or to a new way of doing something. But yeah, it is like, it's not necessarily looking into the outsides for no reason at all. I mean, that kind of, when Aquarius season really comes in, it is kind of more nebulous like that. It'll just start pushing people to the fringes. But for it to be operational in your own life, you might want to start thinking about what you're searching for. You're like, what do you need to fill all these gaps, to like, to create solutions for all these problems, you know, that it doesn't matter if it doesn't exist already, you know, just start looking for it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know we'd mentioned peacock or last time we were talking, and I thought about that again in relation to this, but it's really just this mysterious blue, and it could be like anything really, like a turquoise or a labradorite or kyanite, but it's that side of the blue that really, I guess, leads to an intuition or like a third eye guidance.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I'm really all about using this Jupiter and Scorpio that we have all year. But I mean, I have Jupiter and Scorpio natally, but I think it's obviously it's going to be Jupiter prime time next year when Jupiter's in Sagittarius and rulership, and it's ultra Jupiter. But this current Jupiter we have is very interesting. I think it's a really good opportunity for people to like tear the layers off things and see what's underneath them, like find all the the creatures that live beneath the stones. But yeah, anything that has a Jupiter signature is going to be interesting. I create a lot of provocative investigation.
Mm-hmm.
So how are we going to use the stones? Do you suggest people be wearing them, be making elixirs, or laying them out? Do you want to lay out some different techniques and then kind of like review each stone and what they're for?
Okay, so yeah, the process of using the stones, I think it really just depends on what you're trying to do and how intense you're trying to get into it. I think something like amethyst, it's a great stone that you could, if you had around, and it's pretty common, you could put it underneath your pillow at night when you go to bed, or if you're meditating, maybe holding it in your hand. It's also a quartz, so you could put it, say, in some water and let it sit overnight while you're dreaming, and then have a drink of it in the morning. Things like that. And the rutilated quartz is something I think that's really good to have in sight. And this could also, again, be like you have it there when you're having breakfast or something, or say you're like, oh, I'm actually going to like rub it on, or I'm going to like put it on the dash of the car when I go around today, and sort of have it in sight. And I feel like things like the black stones are nice to actually be wearing, or to maybe have like at home, like on your altar, or in some spot where you've placed some things already that are dealing with maybe even like pictures of friends, or sort of like family or people that you care about, or things that you care about that you would want to feel safe. So sort of in some space like that. But I think actually it's really great as like a necklace or something like that. And the garnet, I feel like, is really good for like a pocket stone, something you could have in your pocket that maybe you'd be holding with your hand or something while you're talking to somebody, you're dealing with something that you need to get through, and sort of almost like people use like a worry stone or a piece of wood or something that they'd rub on. But I also think if you don't have access to these stones, just even thinking about the colors, even related to like maybe the clothing that you're wearing, or the makeup you're going to put on, or something like that.
Beautiful.
What about speaking with the stones and to begin engagement? Do you have like a procedure to say like, okay, I'm going to start working with this stone. How do I approach it?
Well, yeah, I think actually the cleaning process is always the first step in that, and that would be having some sort of initiation, or a refreshing moment with something. Maybe you've had like a piece of amethyst since you were 12 years old or something, and you've still held on to it. And a lot of people have stones like that they've held on to, and especially amethyst. And then being like, okay, I'm going to put it in some water, and I'm going to put it outside, even during the new moon when there isn't any moon, but just sort of as a symbolic gesture that you're going to put it out over night, and it's gonna go through some cleansing phase, and then dumping that water out. And you can get as precise as even like using some chopsticks to move it out of the water and not actually let it touch your body, and then placing it where you want it to be, but some sort of cleansing initiation, and then knowing that it's charged and ready to go. And the next time you touch that stone, you're going to be going into some direction that you've initiated it for.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think initiation is not a step to be skipped. It's the activating action,
Yeah.
But our time has come to an end.
Yeah, we're running out of time here, so we're going to thank you very much, and we can't wait to have you back on, and maybe we'll skip the forecast some week, and we'll just have a full stone episode, kind of to looking more forward in time, and maybe break up like
the larger, maybe we could focus on the larger aspects of the year, and
the year to come, and kind of really tackle like what our combo is. I like these cocktails of stones that you're giving us, and thinking about if people even want to get into like some simple form of jewelry making, or how to make like their bouquet,
Yeah, I think it gets really important, the idea of companionship, and the idea that like there's an intensity to things, and it's nice to have something else to sort of like counter and help with that, and how like that overlapping section between things is really where the magic happens or something.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's like adjusting the levels on the mix, but also with kind of another person, that you have like an engineering team with you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks.
Thanks for having me on the show again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you for listening to Liminal Light. Our theme music was composed by the ever-talented Asa Irons. Today's background sound was created by Grant Corum, the Orchardist. Check out all his music and releases at psychicsounds.com. I'm your host, Chrissy Puchere Rapucci, and you can find me at atavisceral.com. ATAVISCERAL.com, where I post articles and forecasts, offer chart readings, talismanic concoctions, occult services, tarot, divination, and more. CMB.